Hi guys, here's the video that goes over the second half of the spring multiple choice review packet, so 26 through 50. Number 26, which of these events is not an independent event? So not independent means that you are looking for a dependent, I guess it would help if I could spell it, dependent events. So dependent means that once you do something, there is a change that's happening because the second event will depend on the first one. So looking at A, 3 yellow marbles are picked from a bag of 8 blue and 8 yellow marbles without replacement. So without replacement means that once I take one of the marbles out, I am not putting it back in. So that changes the number of marbles in the bag once I draw a second marble. So this right here is a dependent event. All the other ones are independent because nothing is changing with whatever it is that you're doing. So 3 yellow marbles are picked from a bag of 8 blue marbles, 8 yellow marbles with replacement. So that means I'm putting the marble that I pick back into the bag, so the bag stays the same. A 12-sided dice does not change when you roll it, and a quarter does not change when you flip it. So all 3 of those are independent events. 27, for 2 independent events C and D, the probability of C is 0.25, probability of D is 0.7. What is the probability of C and D? So another way to write this is with the set notation. So C and D is the intersection. So the probability of C and D, since they are independent events, you can multiply your 2 probabilities together. So you have 0.25 times 0.7. Getting my calculator. Gives you 0.175. So the correct answer for that is B. 28. This problem I want you to star because it has massive typos. So, typos. Suppose 2 events A and B are mutually exclusive. Here's one typo. That should actually say independent. And that's how it's worded on your final exam. That's why we're changing it. The probability of A is 0.15. The probability of B is 0.05. What is the probability of A given B? The probability of A given B. Okay, so for this one, the probability of A given B is the probability of A and B divided by the probability of B. So the probability of A and B, just like you did with problem number 27, you multiply your 2 probabilities together. So that would be 0.15 times 0.05 divided by the probability of B, which is 0.05. Now if you look at the way that this is written, your 0.05s are going to cancel. So then that just leaves you with the probability of A, which is 0.15. Now if you look at your answer choices, you don't have anything that says 0.15, which is why this one has massive typos. None of these answers actually work, but your correct answer is 0.15. So since the 2 events are independent, the probability of A given B is just the same thing as the probability of A. Alright, 29. The table shows data for a poll of 40 randomly selected people for their preference of car colors in the United States, sorted by men's and women's preferences. Find the probability of other given women. So you're going to look at the column, or the row I should say. You're looking at the row of women. Okay, so your total for women is the 20. Now out of those 20 women, the ones that prefer other was 11. So your probability is going to be 11 out of the 20, which you can see your answer choices are percents, so I'm going to divide that. So that's going to give you 55%. So your answer for that is C. Kelly randomly chooses a card from a standard deck of 52 playing cards. What is the probability that she chooses an ace or a jack? Answer as a reduced fraction. So there are 4 aces in your standard deck of cards. So that's 4 out of 52. Now with the or probabilities, you're going to add the probabilities together and subtract any overlaps. So I have my 4 out of 52 for the aces. There's 4 out of 52 for the jacks. You need to ask yourself, do we have any aces that are jacks? Because that would be an overlap that you have to subtract. Well, you don't have any aces that are jacks. So you can just add those two together. So that's 8 out of 52, which can be reduced to 2/13. Now, if you want to just reduce it in the calculator, you can hit alpha y equals to get the fraction, and if you type in 8 on top, 52 on the bottom, and then hit enter, the calculator will give you the 2/13, which is C. Alright, 31. You also need to star because, again, massive typos. And I do apologize for that. There are 15 runners in a race. What is the probability that Beth, Brian, Brad, and Bailey place first through fourth place in any order? So for Beth, Brian, Brad, and Bailey, the way that they can get first through fourth place is you have these place markers. You have 4 choices for the first place, 3 choices for the second place, 2 choices for the third place, and 1 choice for the fourth place. So that gives us 3 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is 24. So the number of ways that Beth, Brian, Brad, and Bailey can get first through fourth is 24 ways. Now it asks for the probability. So we need to know the total number of ways that people can get first through fourth place. That is a combination. So that's going to be 15, choose 4. So out of the 15 people, we're choosing the 4 people that are going to be in first through fourth. So I'm going to use my calculator. You can hit alpha. I'm going to write this down. Alpha. Oh, actually you can't do that on the regular TI-84s, only the colored ones. So ignore this. Don't hit alpha. Hit math. Go to PRB for probability. So move to the right. Go to PRB. And then it is your first or your third option, the NCR. If you do that first, it's gonna say ANS and then NCR. So we really should have typed in the 15 first and then went through this entire process. So 15 math, go to PRB, and then type in the 4, and it gives you 1365. Okay, so then your final answer, the probability is 24 because there's 24 ways that those 4 people can get first through fourth out of the total number of ways you can get first through fourth, which is 1365. That can be reduced using my calculator, so 24, 1365, that reduces to 8 over 455. Now, if you look at your answer choices, we do not have anything that says 8 over 455, which is why this one had typos. I promise you, your final exam does not have any typos. Alright, 32. Shannon scored an 86 on her final exam. The average score on the final exam in her class was 78% with a standard deviation of 7.6%. What is the Z-score of Shannon's grade? So to calculate the Z-score, you start with Shannon's grade minus the mean, or the average, which was 78, divided by the standard deviation. And you can plug that in. So 86 minus 78 divided by 7.6 gives you 1.05. Z-scores you always round to 2 decimal places. So your answer for that is A. 33, a manufacturer finds that the life expectancy of its best-selling refrigerators is 25 years. The standard deviation is 1 year. The lifespans are approximately normally distributed. What percent of dishwasher models will last from 24 to 28 years? So since it's normally distributed, we should draw a normal curve. So, let's see. The life expectancy of its best-selling refrigerators is 25 years, so that's the mean. The standard deviation is 1 year. So your standard normal curve has 3 standard deviations in both directions. So 1, 2, 3. So this is 25, 26, 27, 28, 1, 2, 3, 24, 23, 22. We can also write our percents. So within 1 standard deviation is 68%, so that's 34, 34. Within 2 standard deviations is 95, so that makes this 13.5, 13.5. The next one over is 2.35. And then the last one is 0.15. Now this one says from 24 to 28 years. So 24 to 28 years, you are looking at this portion of the normal curve. So I can add those percents together. So I have 34 plus 34 plus 13.5 plus the 2.35. So 34 plus 34 plus 13.5 plus 2.35 gives you 83.85%, which is about 84. So your answer for that is C. Alright, 34. A flower shop's records indicate that the mean height of their tulips is 25.4 centimeters with a standard deviation of 2.6. Assuming a normal distribution again, estimate the percent of tulips with a height less than 20.2 centimeters. So again, let's draw the normal curve. We got our mean in the middle, which is 25.4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The standard deviation is 2.6, so 25.4 plus 2.6 is 28, plus 2.6, 30.6, plus 2.6 is 33.2. And then I'm going to go in the opposite direction, so 25.4 minus 2.6 is 22.8. Minus 2.6 is 20.2, and then minus 2.6 is 17.6. Okay, we can also put in our percents. Now before I put in the percents, we just want to look at the percent that's less than 20.2 centimeters. So less than 20.2 would be these two portions underneath the curve. So the one that's furthest to the left is 0.15. Next one over is 2.35. So we can add those two together. So that gives us 0.15 plus 2.35. which equals 2.5. So 2.5%, which is letter D. Alright, the Tempe Union High School District School Board wants to interview students for their school district to get feedback on their schools. They mail a letter asking for students to participate in an interview with the members of the school board. 200 students sign up to participate in the interviews. What type of sample is this? This is a self-selected, which I think it's pretty obvious with the way that this question is worded. But let's go over the definitions of these. Stratified is when you are separated into groups first. So groups, then randomly selected, from each group. Convenience is anything that is easy for the data collector. Self-selected is any volunteering. Cluster and stratified are very similar. You're still putting into groups. Then you select the groups at random. And then you use everyone in the group. Okay, so you need to know those definitions when you take the final. Janessa wants to know how many of her peers know the historical significance of Cinco de Mayo. She sits in the school cafeteria and asks students who walk by what Cinco de Mayo means. What type of sample is this? This is convenience, because she's just sitting in the cafeteria and asking students who walk by what Cinco de Mayo means. So all the kids that walk by, it's easy for her to ask the question. So that's convenience. A student in ASU's teacher training program wants to know if group activities help students learn. He visits the teacher's classroom once a week for 1 semester, taking notes on learning topics, student grouping, and student understanding. Is this an experiment or an observational study? So an experiment is whenever you have a treatment, so you are actually doing something. An observational study is when you're sitting back and just observing, which is exactly what the ASU student is doing. So not an experiment. So the student gathers data instead of applying a treatment. So your answer for that is letter A. So whenever you apply a treatment, that is an experiment. Based on a recent manufacturing test, a coffee machine company claims that 3 out of every 1,200 machines are defective. So 3 out of 1,200. 10,800 machines were tested. Predict the number of machines that were defective. So I can take that ratio and multiply it by 10,800. So 3 out of the 1,200 times 10,800 is 27. So your answer for that is C. Alright. When Mr. Hendrickson was in college, he had an internship with the New York Giants football team. One of his responsibilities was to find out how the community felt about the team. Which of these methods would be best to get a representative sample? So he wants to find out how the community felt about the team. So a representative sample needs to represent the community. So A, asking the people who he sees who are wearing New York Giants jerseys, selecting every 5th person who enters a sporting goods store, selecting people in the library during the Super Bowl, or select people randomly from a list of community residents. Correct answer for this would be D. It wouldn't be representative for A because the people wearing New York Giants jerseys obviously like the team. It wouldn't be B because those people obviously like sports. And selecting people in the library during the Super Bowl, those people obviously do not like sports. Otherwise they would be watching the Super Bowl. So correct answer should be D. And random is always the best way to go. Random will give you the best representative sample. Number 40, the bar graph represents the housing prices over a 2-year period. Why may the graph be misleading? So if you look at the graph, you have 1998 and 1990. It automatically jumps to 8,000. So it goes from 80,000, 81,000, 82,000. This right here looks like a huge jump with the way that your y-axis is scaled, your vertical axis, but in reality it's only 2,000. So that's why it's misleading. So the graph is misleading because the vertical axis is not scaled evenly. That's not true. Just kidding. It's because it does not start at 0. It is scaled evenly. But since it doesn't start at 0, which it should, since it doesn't start at 0, it's zoomed in too far, which makes it look like there's a huge jump when in reality it's not. So correct answer for that is C. 41, the line graph represents the number of students enrolled at a high school over a 5-year time period. Why is the graph misleading? So the graph is misleading because there aren't enough years. Well, that's relative, so that's fine. The graph is misleading because a scatter plot is not an appropriate method, an appropriate choice for this data set. I think a scatter plot is fine for this. The graph is misleading because the vertical axis does not start at 0. If you look at the way that this is scaled, you have 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, so it looks like it's going up every 500. Let's keep looking at the scale. Then 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, so it's not scaled evenly. So the graph is misleading because the vertical axis is not scaled evenly. True. The horizontal axis also skips 2004, which is true. So your answer for this is D. Alright, what is the inverse of f of x equals 3x plus 5 squared minus 10? So to find the inverse, you start by writing it, change your f of x to a y, so you have y equals 3x plus 5 squared minus 10. From there, you are going to switch your x and your y. So we have x equals 3y plus 5 squared minus 10, and then from there you're going to solve for y. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So I get x plus 10 equals 3y plus 5 squared. I am going to square root both sides to get rid of the square. So then I have x plus 10 equals 3y plus 5. Forgot my square root. Still need to get y by itself, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I have the square root of x plus 10 minus 5 on the outside equals 3y, and then finally I can divide both sides by 3. So correct answer for this is A. What is the inverse of f of x equals log base 2 of x? Again, I'm going to write this as a y, so I have y equals log base 2 of x. I still want to switch my x and my y, so I have x equals log base 2 of y. For this, to be able to solve for y, I'm going to make a note. Change it to exponential form. Okay, so I'm going to start with the base of my log, come across, that's my exponent, come back across, and that's what it equals, which is how you end up solving for y. So I have y equals 2 to the x. So your answer for this is A. 44. I'm going to write y equals 14 to the x. I'm going to switch my x and my y since I'm finding the inverse. So I have x equals 14 to the y. Now, for 43, since I started with logarithmic form and found the inverse, which was exponential form, that might show you that logarithms and exponential functions are inverses of each other. So in this case, since it is in exponential form, I want to change to logarithmic form. So change to log form. I do apologize about my crappy handwriting. So your base for your logarithm is the same thing as the base for the log. So this is a log base 14 of x equals y. So your answer for that is B. Alright, given f of x equals 5 square root of x plus 7, which transformation is described from the parent function f of x equals the square root of x. So the number in front of your function is always either a vertical stretch or a vertical compression. If it is bigger than 1, that is a vertical stretch. If it is in between 0 and 1, that is a vertical compression. 5 is bigger than 1, so it's a vertical stretch. So you can eliminate those two answer choices. The plus 7 is inside the function, so plus 7 actually means that you are moving to the left, not to the right. So inside the function is left and right. Outside the function, so if I had like a plus 2 hanging out here, that's up or down, so that plus 2 would mean up 2. But inside the function, the adding means you're moving to the left, minus means you are moving to the right. It's the opposite of what you would think. What kind of function best describes the following graph? That is a V, which is an absolute value function. Which function has the same y-intercept as the function shown in the graph? So your y-intercept is wherever your graph crosses the y-axis. So that is at 0, -2. So for all of these, to find your y-intercept, you are just looking at the constants at the ends of your function. Because your y-intercept is when you plug in 0 for x, and if you plug in 0 for x, all that disappears. Because all that's going to equal 0. Going to equal 0. Going to equal 0. Going to equal 0. So the one that gives you -2 is B. Alright, which function best models the data shown in the scatter plot? So the 2x is a linear function, so that should be a line. 2 to the x is an exponential function, so that should grow very fast, like that. X squared is a parabola, so that would be a u. And the square root of x is going like that. So your answer for this is D. And you can also see that it's the square root of x by actually looking at the points. So for instance, when I look at 1 and I take the square root of 1, it equals 1. If I look at 4 and take the square root of 4, it equals 2, which is why it's up at 2. And when I take the square root of 9, it equals 3, which is why your point is up at 3. So just another way to look at it. 49 and 50 require you to use a graphing calculator to be able to determine which function you're going to use. So these are the keystrokes that you're going to do. Your first one is you are going to start by hitting Stat and then go to Edit. So Stat, Edit, and then hit Enter. You're going to put your first column into L1, second column into L2. So L1 I have 0, 1, 5, 7, 10. And then L2 I have 6, 7, 40, 140, and 1000. You hit Enter every time you put in a value, by the way. From there, you are going to hit Stat and then Calc. So you hit Stat again, move over to Calc. Now there's 4 different types of regression that you need to do. So you're going to have to do 4, which is the linear regression. You are going to have to do 5, which is the quadratic regression. You're going to have to do 0, which is the exponential regression. And you're going to have to do 9, which is the logarithmic regression. Now what you're looking for these, once you evaluate these, you look at the R-squared. So the closer your R-squared is to 1, the better. So whichever function is closest to 1, the R-squared, that's going to be the type of function that best models the data in your table. So when I do the linear regression, so I'm going to go to number 4 and then hit Enter. You have all of these options. Just scroll all the way down and hit Calculate. Oh, forgot to tell you something very, very important. So when I did that and I hit Calculate, I did not see anything with an R-squared. So probably the most important step with all of this is to make sure Stat Diagnostics is on. So you're going to go to Mode, scroll all the way down until you see Stat Diagnostics. And make sure it is on. Mine was off. Okay, so let's try this again. Gonna go to Stat, Calc, Linear Regression, go down to Calculate, hit Enter, and now I see an R squared. So my R squared for this is 0.6372. And I'm gonna do the same thing for my quadratic, exponential, and logarithmic. So now I'm gonna go to Stat, Calc, go to Quadratic Regression, which is number 5. Scroll down to Calculate. My R squared is 0.9712. Stat, Calc, go to Exponential, which is 0. Go to Calculate. My R squared for this is 0.9821. Stat, Calc, go to number 9, the logarithmic regression. This one gives you an error, which is okay. That just means the logarithmic function does not work, but it gives you an error, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, out of these three, you got to pick the one that's closest to 1. So the function that is closest to 1 is the exponential function, so the exponential function is the one that best models the data in the table. So these keystrokes that are written down over here you have to do for these types of questions, which is the same thing that we are doing for number 50. So again, I'm going to go to Stat. My Stat Diagnostics are already on, so I don't have to worry about that. Go to Stat. I'm going to go to Edit. Now I already have my data from 49 in here, so Stat and then Edit. So I need to get rid of all of the data, so I can just go ahead and delete every single one by hitting the delete key and then retyping them in. So this is going to be my L1, this is going to be my L2. Now if anything is ever given to you in years, you should not put the entire year in there because your calculator might freak out once it gets to the exponential regression. So instead of putting 2000, I'm going to put in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all in my L1. L2 is 787, 986, 1180, 1259, and 1331. Now I'm going to do the same thing. So once we have it in there, you're going to go to Stat again. And now you're going to move over to Calc, and you have those options for the linear regression, quadratic regression, and exponential regression, and your logarithmic regression. So linear regression is number 4. Go down to Calculate, gives you, for your R squared, gives you 0.9468. Quadratic regression is number 5. That gives you 0.9965. Exponential regression, which is 0. That gives you 0.9163. Now the exponential regression was the one that would freak out if you put in 2000 instead of 0. You would get an overflow error, just to give you a heads up on that. But it wouldn't affect the linear, quadratics, or the logarithmic, just the exponential. Actually, it might affect the logarithmic. But logarithmic regression, again, gives you an error. So your answer for this is the one that's closest to 1, which is B. Alright, so that covers everything on your final exam review packet. I hope these videos help you prepare for your final. I hope you all get A's.